My dear friend, close your eyes and imagine. You are 82 years old, your hair is silvered, and your eyes are deeply etched with the wrinkles of time and memories. You've navigated the ups and downs of life, achieved successes, built relationships, and experienced memorable moments. But deep within your heart, a regret still smolders, a decision you wish you had never made: moving into a nursing home. Perhaps you, or a loved one, are standing at this crossroads, considering whether a nursing home is the best option. Perhaps you believe it's the safest, most convenient, and ensures the best care. But before you put pen to paper on that admission form, before you surrender your autonomy and step into a completely different world, I want to share with you 6 things I wish I had known before the nursing home doors closed behind me. I have no intention of painting a bleak picture of nursing homes. I understand that some people genuinely need the medical care and comprehensive support that these facilities provide. However, I want you to fully understand the price you'll pay, the sacrifices you'll make when choosing life in a nursing home. Because once you've entered, returning to a life of freedom and independence isn't as simple as you imagine. Join me in exploring the 6 biggest regrets of someone who spent their final years in a nursing home. Valuable lessons that can completely change your perspective and help you make the wisest decision for your future. Regret number 1, losing sacred freedom. The first and perhaps most shocking thing I realized when moving into a nursing home wasn't the small room with its 4 white walls, the meals scheduled mechanically, or the unfamiliar faces, people I had never met before. Rather, it was the realization, the heartbreaking understanding that I had lost control of my life, the freedom to choose and decide everything as I pleased. Before, I had my own habits, personal interests, and a daily schedule that I created myself. I decided when to wake up to greet the sunrise, when to enjoy a hot cup of coffee, when to start working, and when to rest. I could stroll in the park whenever I wanted, breathe in the fresh air, and admire the rows of green trees. I could cook my favorite dishes myself, invite friends home for meals and lively conversation. Or sometimes, I simply wanted to sit alone in my familiar armchair, read a good book, and sip hot tea. But in a nursing home, all of that became a thing of the past. I realized that time was no longer my own, but belonged to a system, a pre-established process. Everything occurred according to a rigid schedule, with no room for freedom and spontaneity. Breakfast was served at a certain hour, even if I didn't feel hungry. Lights out was a mandatory regulation, whether I was sleepy or not. If I wanted to stroll outside, I had to ask permission and wait for a healthcare worker to have free time to assist me. Even the simplest decisions like what to eat or wear suddenly became luxurious privileges instead of basic choices that I had naturally enjoyed before. I still clearly remember my first week at the nursing home when I woke up in a strange bed in a room that was unfamiliar. I sat up, stretched to dispel the sleepiness, and reached for the book I had been reading at home, the detective novel that had captivated me from the very first pages. But when I looked around the room, a feeling of emptiness and disappointment overwhelmed me. I realized that this wasn't my home, not the place I had been attached to throughout my life. My favorite books, the familiar armchair, the family photos, and the personal belongings that I had accumulated over many years had all vanished, giving way to sterile walls, a monotonous bed that I hadn't chosen, and an indescribable feeling of loneliness and disorientation. I was no longer the master of my own life, but just a small cog in a giant machine, operating according to rules and regulations that I couldn't control. The most difficult part, the part that caused me the most pain, was realizing that once you've given up your sacred freedom, regaining it is almost impossible. You adapt because you have to. You learn to accept and comply with the regulations. You stop arguing when they decide the menu for dinner. You stop asking if you can stroll whenever you want. You learn to integrate into their system, to become a part of it. But in the process, you gradually lose yourself, lose the values, the beliefs, and the dreams that have shaped who you are. Imagine Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, a symbol of fairness and equality. She dedicated her entire life to fighting for the rights of women and the disadvantaged in society. always making decisions based on conscience and justice. If Justice Ginsburg had to live in an environment where every action, every thought was controlled and monitored, could she continue to be herself, a strong, independent, and capable woman? I believe she would feel stifled and frustrated, like a bird trapped in a cage, losing the ability to fly and contribute to society. I believe that freedom is one of the most basic human needs, a priceless gift that we need to cherish and protect. When we lose our freedom, we lose an important part of ourselves, losing the ability to make our own decisions and shape our lives. We become passive, dependent on others, and lose the motivation to live a full, meaningful life. A nursing home can offer you safety and convenience, but it can also take away your freedom and independence, turning you into a puppet in a play you didn't write the script for. So, before making this important decision, carefully consider what you're willing to trade, the values that you can't give up. Ask yourself, are you truly willing to sacrifice your sacred freedom in exchange for safety and convenience in a nursing home? Regret number 2, feeling forgotten in the flow of life. One of the cruelest truths, one of the most difficult pains to swallow when you move into a nursing home is realizing that the outside world continues to move and evolve. That life continues with all its joys and sorrows, successes and failures, without your participation. When I first arrived at the nursing home, my family promised that they would visit me regularly, that I would never feel lonely or abandoned. I believed that promise, and in the early days, they kept their word. My daughter visited me once a week, bringing small gifts and happy stories to share. My grandchildren came every weekend, playing and talking with me about school, friends, and their hobbies. For a short time, I felt like I was still connected to my previous life, that I was still an important part of the family and society. But as time passed, things gradually changed. Visits became less frequent. Phone calls replaced direct meetings. My daughter began to get busy with work and her own family. My grandchildren had to focus on studying and extracurricular activities. Holidays became particularly painful occasions when everyone promised to visit, but in the end, plans always changed at the last minute. I often found myself sitting alone in the common room, watching other nursing home residents longingly waiting for their loved ones to visit, hoping that today would be the day that someone remembered them. It wasn't that my family no longer loved me or intentionally forgot me. Life was simply too busy, too much pressure and responsibility. When you no longer appear in the daily lives of your loved ones, it's easy for them to assume that you're still okay, that you're adapting well to your new life, that you don't need as much attention and care as before. But the truth is, the longer you stay in a nursing home, the more likely you are to be forgotten, the more you feel like a burden to your family and society. I remember one evening, I was sitting alone in my room, holding my cell phone in my hand and hesitating whether to call my son. I didn't want to be a burden to him, didn't want to remind him that I was here, waiting for a visit that might never come. So I put the phone down and sighed. That's when I realized that this is my life now. Days passing by slowly and tediously, hoping that someone will remember me, will include me in their plans and activities. Imagine Oprah Winfrey, a media queen, a powerful and influential woman worldwide. She dedicated her entire life to connecting with people, inspiring and bringing hope to millions of viewers. If Oprah had to live in an isolated environment, lacking communication and connection with the outside world, could she continue to spread positive messages and change people's lives? I believe she would feel lost and disappointed, like a flame extinguished, no longer able to illuminate and warm people's hearts. I believe that connection and communication are important factors for maintaining mental and emotional health, especially for older adults. When we feel isolated and forgotten, we easily fall into depression, anxiety, and lose the meaning of life. A nursing home can provide you with a safe and caring environment, but it can also make you feel isolated and separated from the outside world, like a deserted island in the vast ocean. Therefore, before making the decision to move into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you mentally prepared to face loneliness and the feeling of being forgotten? Are you strong enough to maintain relationships with family and friends, To not be swept away by the flow of life without your participation. Regret number 3, losing a noble purpose in life. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought I was just changing my place of residence, moving from my beloved home to a healthcare facility. I didn't realize that I was also changing my reason for living, losing the goals and motivations that had driven me throughout my life. At home, I had responsibilities, routines, hobbies, and a reason to wake up every morning to start a new day full of enthusiasm. Even the smallest things like watering plants, making coffee, cleaning the house, also gave me a sense of usefulness, a feeling that I was contributing to my own life and the lives of those around me. But in the nursing home, all those daily rituals disappeared. Meals were prepared, cleaning was done by others, the potted plants were no longer mine to care for. At first, I told myself that it was wonderful to finally relax. No more housework, no more responsibilities, just rest and enjoy life. But after a few weeks, I realized that I was missing something extremely important. The days passed slowly and meaninglessly, stretching endlessly with nothing to do but wait. I saw that in the other nursing home residents, people who had once been full of energy and enthusiasm now just sat silently, staring into empty space, waiting for time to pass. There was a man named George, 84 years old, a skilled carpenter who had dedicated his entire life to working with wood. At home, he always fixed broken things, built small projects in his garage, creating unique works of art from scraps of wood. But in the nursing home, there were no tools, no projects, nothing for him to create and express himself. I witnessed him gradually closing himself off, his hands once strong and skillful now useless, lying still on his lap. "I feel useless," he said to me one day, and I understood exactly what he meant. When you no longer have something to care for, no goal to work towards, life begins to lose its meaning. The mind slows down, the body weakens, and soon you begin to feel like just an anonymous person in a place where time still passes, but nothing really changes. Imagine Jane Addams, a social activist, a pioneering woman who founded Hull House, a community center for the poor and immigrants in Chicago. She dedicated her entire life to serving the community, helping those in need, and fighting for social justice. If Jane Addams had to live in an environment where she couldn't help others, couldn't contribute to society, could she continue to find meaning in life? I believe she would feel pain and disappointment, like a river blocked, no longer able to irrigate the barren fields. I believe that purpose in life is the flame that lights our path, the motivation that drives us to overcome difficulties and challenges. When we have a noble purpose in life, we feel that our lives have meaning and value. We are motivated to wake up every morning and do good things for ourselves and for society. A nursing home can provide you with a safe and caring environment, but it can also take away your purpose in life, making you feel useless and worthless. Therefore, before making the decision to move into a nursing home, ask yourself, what brings meaning to your life? What makes you feel alive and valuable? Can you find new purposes in life in the nursing home? Or will you have to fight to keep the things that once made your life meaningful? Regret number 4, health declining faster than expected. Before moving into the nursing home, I was still quite healthy for my age. I couldn't run marathons, but I could still take care of myself, stroll around the neighborhood, and cook simple meals. I had small habits, daily activities that helped me maintain my health and flexibility, such as going shopping, doing morning exercises, and walking around the house to keep my legs healthy. But once I moved into the nursing home, everything changed. At first, I thought I was just relaxing, enjoying a leisurely and comfortable life. Meals were brought to my room. I no longer had to stand in the kitchen to cook. If I needed anything, I just pressed a button and a healthcare worker would come to help. But what I didn't realize was the less I did for myself, the weaker I became. I stopped moving as much as before, and soon my legs felt stiff. I sat more often, and before I realized it, getting up from a chair became an agony. The muscles that I had spent years maintaining were disappearing faster than I thought. And I wasn't the only one experiencing this. I witnessed the same thing happening to other nursing home residents. People who had once walked firmly on their own feet, now had to rely on wheelchairs. People who had once been independent and autonomous now needed help with things they had never struggled with before. The more help we were given, the more we seemed to need help. I remember my neighbor, Alice, an 81-year-old woman full of life when she first came to the nursing home. She often strolled in the campus, asserting that she wouldn't slow down just because of a number. But after a few months, I noticed she wasn't walking as much as before. Then, she started using a walker, then a wheelchair. One day, she looked at me and said, "I don't know what happened, but I feel like I've aged 10 years in just a few months." And that's exactly what I felt. When you stop using your body, you start losing it. And in a nursing home, where everything is designed to make life easier, it's easy to forget that moving is not just about convenience, but also about survival. If I had known how quickly I would lose my strength, I would have fought more fiercely to continue moving, to stay active, to push myself even when I didn't want to. Imagine Jack Lalanne, a fitness guru, a man who has inspired millions of people around the world maintaining physical and mental health, especially for older adults. When we exercise, we stimulate the organs in our body, enhance blood circulation, improve memory, and reduce the risk of chronic diseases. A nursing home can provide you with a safe and caring environment, but it can also make you become passive and lazy, leading to a faster decline in health than expected. Therefore, before making the decision to move into a nursing home, ask yourself, will you still have the motivation to keep your body healthy when everything is set up to make life easier and more comfortable? Are you determined enough to overcome laziness and continue exercising, even when you don't want to? Regret number 5, losing privacy and self-respect. One of the things I didn't fully consider before moving into a nursing home was how much privacy I would lose. At home, I had my own space. I could close the bedroom door, sit in silence if I wanted to, and do things my own way. But in a nursing home, privacy is a luxury you don't always get to have. From the moment I arrived, I felt like I was constantly being watched. Staff were constantly coming and going, checking rooms on schedule, and there were common areas where you were rarely alone. Even simple things like getting dressed or using the toilet often required someone else's help. I know they were just doing their job, but it wasn't easy to accept help for things you had done independently your whole life. I remember my first week, I struggled with the idea that I had to ask permission to do things I used to do without thinking. Want to take a shower? You may have to wait until someone is available to help. Need to use the restroom? Sometimes pressing the call button means waiting longer than you'd like. Even meal choices were limited. If you don't like something on the menu that day, too bad. And then there's the issue of roommates. Not everyone gets a private room, and sharing a space with someone else, someone you didn't choose, can be uncomfortable. I was lucky to have a kind roommate, but I've heard stories from others who weren't so fortunate. Some had roommates who were loud, filthy, or even had cognitive issues that made sleep nearly impossible. And no matter how hard you try to make your room feel like home, it's never truly yours. Self-respect is a hard thing to lose, and I didn't realize how much of it I'd have to give up until I was already there. When people knock but don't always wait for an answer before entering, when you're spoken to like a patient instead of a person, when your daily routines are dictated by a schedule you didn't create, it changes you. You start to feel less like yourself and more like just another name on a list. Imagine Rosa Parks, the courageous woman who refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white man, sparking the civil rights movement in the United States. She stood up for her dignity and rights, despite discrimination and injustice. If Rosa Parks had to live in an environment where she had no self-determination, no privacy, and had to follow unjust rules, could she continue to maintain her self-respect and resilience? I believe she would feel offended and humiliated, like a flower trampled, losing its beauty and vitality. I believe that privacy and self-respect are important factors for maintaining human dignity and value, especially for older adults. When we feel that our privacy is invaded and we are treated disrespectfully, we easily feel ashamed, helpless, and lose faith in ourselves. A nursing home can provide you with a safe and caring environment, but it can also take away your privacy and self-respect, making you feel like a senseless object with no rights to decide and no value. Therefore, before making the decision to move into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared to give up the privacy and control you've had throughout your life? Regret number 6. Realizing it's much harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was only temporary. I thought I'd give it a try, see how things went, and if I didn't like it, I could always leave. But what I didn't realize was how hard it would be to get out once you're in. At first, it seemed simple. If I didn't like it, I'd go home. But home wasn't the same anymore. My house was empty, and maintaining it from afar became difficult. My children had started making changes, selling things they thought I wouldn't need, even considering renting out the house. When I mentioned the idea of returning, they hesitated. Are you sure you can manage on your own? Wouldn't it be safer to stay? We only want what's best for you. And then there was the issue of physical decline. After months of living in a place where I didn't have to cook, clean, or even walk too far, I wasn't as healthy as I used to be. The independence I once had began to slip away, making the idea of moving back home more difficult than I ever imagined. I was no longer confident in my ability to live alone, and that fear kept me stuck. I've met others who have had the same experience. They thought they would try the nursing home for a short time, only to realize that leaving wasn't as easy as they thought. The longer you stay, the harder it is to adjust to life outside. Some people even lost the opportunity altogether once their house was sold or their savings were depleted by the cost of care. There was no turning back. That's the part nobody tells you. Moving in feels like a decision you can reverse, but for most people, it isn't. The nursing home gradually becomes your whole world, and before you know it, the outside life you once knew begins to feel like a distant memory. Imagine Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for fighting against the apartheid regime in South Africa. He kept his spirit and faith, always dreaming of the day he would be free and continue to contribute to the country. But if Nelson Mandela had no hope of being released, if he had to live the rest of his life in prison, could he continue to maintain his will and determination? I believe he would feel desperate and lost, like a lighthouse that has been extinguished, no longer able to guide ships that are lost. I believe that hope and belief in the future are important factors for maintaining a positive attitude and overcoming difficulties in life, especially for older adults. When we lose hope of returning to our previous lives, we easily feel discouraged, despair, and lose the motivation to continue living. A nursing home can provide you with a safe and caring environment, but it can also take away your hope and faith, making you feel trapped in a vicious circle with no way out. Therefore, before making the decision to move into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that once you're in, leaving might not be as simple as you think? Closing remarks. Looking back, I don't regret growing old, but I regret believing that a nursing home was my only option. I walked in there hoping for comfort, safety, and a better quality of life. Instead, I found a world that gradually took away my independence, my privacy, my purpose in life, and even my sense of self. Does that mean nursing homes are all bad? Not necessarily. Some people really need the level of care they provide. But before you make that decision, think carefully about what you are giving up, because once you move in, life will never be the same again. If I could do it over, I would have fought harder to stay in my home, explored more ways to get help without giving up my freedom, and made sure that I truly needed to be there before making such a long-term move. And if you're facing this decision, I hope you take the time to ask yourself, is this truly the best for me? Or is it just the easiest thing to do right now? Because the life you have today, your habits, your independence, your choices, are worth holding on to for as long as you can. Thank you for joining us today. We would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and share one thing you have learned today and how you plan to use in your life. Your thoughts are very important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue to create good content to inform and inspire you. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.